What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Fantasy Files podcast, where we talk about our favorite fantasy series and topics. I am your host today, Spencer. Gabe could not make it. And I am joined by the mad scientist of epic fantasy himself, Thomas Howard Riley. And we are here to talk about his book, We Break Immortals. We'll have a spoiler-free interview section in this book, and then later we'll be going into full spoilers. By the way, I think both of us are still a little sick, so please forgive the occasional cough or sniffle. I'll try to edit them out where I can, but you never can get all of them. Before we get into it, I want you to take your dog's paw and have them hit the like and subscribe buttons and the bell icons so that you can get notified when we put out new content. If you have a cat, then don't even bother. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy, where you can get updates on what we're reading and get tons of fantasy and sci-fi recommendations. As for upcoming videos, we have recently passed 1 year as a podcast. So as soon as Gabe is feeling better, we'll be doing a big celebration video where we look back on our first year as a podcast. Also, at the end of May, we will be going to Legendarium Con and doing a vlog the whole way down there. So stay tuned for that. Well, without further ado, let's introduce our guest and talk about maybe some books we've been reading lately, if we've been able to read anything. So Thomas, who are you? What do you write? Where can people follow you? And if you've been reading anything, what have you been reading lately?
Hello, I'm Thomas Howard Riley. I am the author of We Break Immortals, epic fantasy, rated R epic fantasy is the tone of the stuff that I tend to write. I'm currently most active on Twitter at Ornithopteryx. And you can also find interesting information about me, the book, and the series on my website, thomashowardriley.com.
Very cool. Have you, I know that you're writing a lot right now. Have you been able to do any personal reading, any fantasy sci-fi reading, anything like that?
I have a slate of indie books that I'm going to be lining up to read. I started last fall doing 5 simultaneous indie book reads starting in the summer. And so I'm going to be doing that again this year. Also, I am in the midst of a reread of the first Red Rising book.
Ooh,
titled
nice.
Red Rising, of course, because I've been preparing to move on in that series. I do read a lot of sci-fi, honestly,
Cool.
as well as fantasy, but I only write fantasy.
Right.
That's my preferred medium for artistry, but I love reading science fiction quite a bit as well.
Very cool. Cool. Yeah. So you've read the entire first trilogy of
Just
Red
the first
Rising?
book.
Oh, just the first book?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I have not even gotten into the second or third. So I was reading it and completed it around the time where a bunch of things happened where I couldn't continue with the series for one reason or another. And so I'm just refamiliarizing myself with it before moving on to any of the other books.
Very cool. Do you do the audiobook?
No, I do the actual, for this one, I'm doing the book / ebook because I have physical and ebook for it.
Oh, okay. If you ever get the chance, I would highly recommend the audiobooks if you like audiobooks. Because the narrator, yeah, the narrator is so good, and like that's the only way I can like picture Darrow's voice now that I've heard
no kidding,
the audiobooks. It's really, really good. And there's singing in it. The Song of Persephone, the song that Io sings, is actually sung in the book. I can't remember. I think it's at the very end, like while the credits are rolling, kind of thing. But they have the actual song there in the audiobook, which is really, really cool.
Oh, that's very cool.
Okay, cool. As for what I've been reading lately, have you have you heard of the Ember Blade? This book, The Ember Blade?
Have heard of that book title. Yes.
Man, it is really cool. People were recommending it for a long time, and I'd kind of been putting it off and putting it off. And eventually, I just kind of picked it up. I had just gone through a 50-hour audiobook that was a horror novel, and it's called Carrie and Comfort, and it was like super like disturbing. There's lots of really dark things that happened in that book. And so I was like, okay, I need something a little lighter, a little
Lighthearted.
brighter.
Yeah.
And so I picked up the Ember Blade, and man, that is really, really great. Um, Epic fantasy. It's kind of no, I guess I would say it's definitely like coming of age fantasy. Like I think when we meet the protagonists, they're like 17 or something, and they're kind of
Okay.
becoming, kind of turning into young men over the summer or whatever time period. And there's so much that happened. I wish I could even remember like what a good like plot synopsis is. But basically these two kids. The main character is also named Aaron. I'm pretty sure it's even spelled the same way
Oh, no
as
kidding.
your Aaron. And they live in a occupied country. Like they some other like military had come over and kind of taken over their land. And so a lot of their people have kind of just given in to this kind of takeover, and they're like, life isn't so bad, like this isn't so terrible, etc. But then there's kind of a group of people that are more like the rebellion, like they want to take their land back. And so these two boys kind of get swept into all of that, and they have to go find the Ember Blade, which is basically this symbol of their people. It's this very, very powerful weapon. So they have to. So little by little, this whole group comes together, and it's just a really great group. I loved all the different friendships and the way all these characters kind of connected. And then they just go off on this quest to find the Ember Blade. It's very stereotypical fantasy, but it's also significantly modern. It's not exactly pigeonholed into the classic fantasy typical story, but it does have a lot of those tropes. And so that was a ton of fun. And then I recently picked up this book called Shadow Prowler, and this is it's kind of like thief fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a Russian book that got translated into
Oh.
English. And going into it, I was really worried about, I guess, just kind of like the translation and how I like if it would click for me, because I tried reading the Witcher books, which didn't really like they were translated too, and they didn't really click for me just in the
Mm-hmm.
way that they were translated. And so I was worried I would have the same experience with this, but it is like perfect. Like I don't see
Oh, that's
any
excellent.
like, yeah, I would never know it was a translation if I hadn't like known beforehand. Um, but basically it's about this thief who gets called upon. He's like the best thief ever, and the king kind of sends scouts into the underworld to find out who the best thief is. And they figure out that it's this guy. His name is Shadow Herald, and they go get him and bring him before the king. And the king kind of sends him on a quest to retrieve some sort of MacGuffin. I forget what it is, but the thief has to put together this whole heist to get this MacGuffin back for the king. And it is a ton of fun. I think that probably one of my favorite rogue fantasy, whether that be like an assassin or a thief or something, is a series by Kelly McCullough called the Fallen Blade series. And ever since I've read that, I have not found another kind of rogue thief assassin fantasy that kind of stacks up next to it. And I think this book gets pretty close. I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is looking for a good heist story or a good like assassin story. He's kind of both. He's kind of an assassin. He's kind of a thief. He mostly just kind of works in the shadows in various ways. So definitely recommend that. All right. Well, let's get into talking about this book, Thomas. I know you're eager to talk about it. I know I'm eager to talk about it. We're gonna stick to some spoiler-free stuff for a while before we get into the spoiler-filled deep dive later on. So I guess I'll start this off with the first question I have here is, it must be pretty exciting to finally have your book out there. What's it been like since releasing it into the world? And what's the overall reception been like from the people who have read it?
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic. It's been very exciting. It's like jubilation mixed with relief to finally have it, exist out in the world. But by and large, it's just thrilling to have people be able to see the work finally that you've been, spending so much time doing and trying to perfect. And it's so far it's having a real terrific reception, generally very positive reception so far. So yeah, it's just great. Since then, I've had, there've been ongoing health things that I've been dealing with aside from writing. But as far as having the book out, that's been one of my shining moments that's been keeping me going throughout the year.
For sure. So I have a question here about audiobooks, because I can't imagine a world in which we don't eventually get an audiobook for this. And I was wondering, have you thought about doing like a Kickstarter or like a GoFundMe, or even like a royalty share thing? I know a lot of people do that. But I was thinking about this the other day and I'm like, why don't more authors do the Kickstarter thing, like, or a GoFundMe? I think maybe I think it would work pretty well.
That's definitely an option that are being looked into, but it's a common thing with indie books that the most expensive thing that you can do upfront cost wise is an audiobook. The rates for audiobook narrator are significant, and rightly so, because you want someone that is professional and very good at what they do. And with the proper recording facilities and everything. So you don't want to skimp on that,
right?
Just like you don't want to skimp on your cover or your whatever. But that is something that is being significantly looked into, and it's in the works as far as it's something that I want to do very much, to have that out there. But part of the problem is the cost of an audiobook is dictated by the length of your book. And so I happen to be the author of what may very well be the longest, chunkiest, thickest epic fantasy book in the indie community. Let me know if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure mine is currently the longest, and it's probably going to be the shortest book of the series. So,
wow.
So that helps push my costs up in that category. So those are considerations that we have to look into. But so long story short, it's something that I want to do. It's just not quite there yet.
I was going to say, it's probably like, I would not be surprised at all if We Break Immortals was like a 40-hour audiobook, or like 30, 35, between 35 and 40. I could,
Yeah,
because it's at least.
it could be in the low 30s just
Oh,
because
really?
there's a lot of dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
Um, because when you go solely by page count, not to get too much into the minutia of it, but
Sure.
it usually is counting on lots of uh exposition and paragraph, and I have a lot of sections that are uh very dialogue heavy, which
Yeah.
pop very quickly as they're spoken. I have
Right.
some entire chapters where it's just a back and forth, argument or conversation of characters. So those parts move a little bit faster, which helps. But long story short, it is what
Yeah.
it is. At the end of the day, you want to have a quality
Yeah,
audiobook narrator, and I do not have the ability to do it myself since I am
for
in
sure.
the air path of an airport nearby. So
Oh,
I routinely would not be able to properly soundproof against
right.
that,
For sure.
unfortunately.
All right. So I know this is a bit of a loaded question, but
Oh,
how did you get the idea for this book and the magic system? Because both the plot and the magic system are so unique. The idea of not having like your typical hero protagonist, but instead having almost like a CSI kind of like crime scene investigator kind of guy, and then having like this kind of psychopathic sorcerer bent on godhood, and just all the things that have to come together in this plot are they really are like very unique to anything else I've read. Plus the magic system alone. So how did where did the seed for this story come from?
well, I tend to get ideas from all over the place, and they just kind of smash together. I throw them in my collider and crash them together until something awesome comes out. Um, the so like there's very few one-to-one inspirations, like one-to-one inspirations, like this
Sure.
specific thing inspired this specific thing. I mean, sometimes like one-off, like a little scene or a snippet of dialogue or something might be just a direct homage to something that inspired me directly. But like the major elements are usually combinations of tons of different things that I heard or learned or thought about or saw over the years, and jammed them together until I had something that I thought would work. It's the same thing I do with any of my world building. Is combine a bunch of things together that normally would not go together and just try to Frankenstein them into a new thing. So um, but generally speaking, some of my early things that I was very interested in, obviously, interested in science fiction ideas, but I was very interested in X-Men comic books in the late '80s, early '90s. I
I
was a
was
big
wondering.
big fan of those, and that was basically the my inspiration for. I'm also big into physics. I was studying physics for a while at the university and everything before I switched career tracks. But I've always been obsessed with like equations that control things, the
Right.
equations that explain how objects move and how forces work, and control them, uh, and those two things kind of combined together a little bit to and I decided I wanted to have like a physics based magic system
Right.
where people can create, not only create uh unique magical effects, but also can like hack into our actual reality and tinker with the amounts of things. Like maybe I'll drop the temperature in this 4 square foot area for whatever reason. Maybe I'll change how heat transfers between metal and flame to make something a person in a suit of armor impervious to fire or something like that. Like that was kind of my concept idea. And the and then to have it be something that's born within the person, to have it not be something that's learned. Well, I mean, you learn how to use your skill,
right,
but it's not something where you can just read out of a book and then say some words and it'll happen. I wanted to be like a thing that you're born with, like a skill,
right.
like and that kind of came from that idea that they had in the X-Men, where it's just genetic. You're born with the ability to maybe be able to do something, and it depends. It's up to you whether you can learn how to control it, develop it, expand it, become better at it, become
Yeah,
more powerful, or not.
right.
And so that kind of came from there.
Okay.
But yeah, so that definitely was one of the things that was in that mesh. But I get inspiration from everywhere. Like, I was always obsessed as a kid with like heads up displays, like heads up goggles, like Predator
Oh
vision,
yeah.
the Terminator in the original Terminator, where you see with its little readouts and things. Um, and I was always fascinated with that, which is where I got the idea to have a thing that
The
a
monocle.
device that could be looked through.
Okay.
And obviously, it's not digital. This is not a
Right.
modern technology society, so it's just like different crystalline minerals that react to the magic. And that was that it was kind of that heads up display being combined with my love of like crime scene investigation, you know, type shows long ago.
Okay.
So anyway, I get ideas from all over the place. Long story short.
Nice. And kind of following along that same line of thought, I have a question down here about so what kind of came first? Like, you have for your maps, let's start with your maps. Do you kind of like figure out what you want your map to look like and then kind of base your story around that, like where they're physically going? Or do you kind of tell your story and then draw your map accordingly?
Early on, it was kind of a ping pong effect, like where I would I started the story initially, and the first idea of it conceptually was that the characters were going to be going from this place to visit this ancient place for whatever the reason was. I don't know. I don't recall what the original reason was for going, because the earliest version of the story did not have almost any of the elements that are in the current
Oh,
story.
really?
So yeah, I layered things on over time as I went. But because the earliest germ of the story was, I probably wrote that 15 years ago.
Oh, really?
Where where it was just like a little short story thing about people going from one place to another, chasing something or other. And
Huh.
at one point, and I would just keep layering things over it, and rewriting things. And then when I decided I wanted to get really serious about it and make it a book, I would go in and do actual real authorly revisions and structural edits and beta reads and things like that. But originally it was just characters going on this journey. And so I needed a place for them to go. And so I sat down and I made sort of a general geography of the place where they start, the place they go through, and the place that they're going. And then I started to, make just little random decisions on the maps about what they would look like and what features would be there. And then those features later on would begin informing the history and the world building, and even in some cases the actions and catastrophes that characters have in the book. So it started playing off of itself to a certain extent. And at one point, I decided I would just sit down and finish doing the whole rest of the world, basically. So at one point, I sat down and just crafted the world map as it exists and the different places in it. And and then in the book, I have some like zoom in maps that have a little more detail of certain areas. of which I have more coming of those kind of maps, by the way,
cool.
for the sequel.
Nice.
But at one point I sat down and I was just like, let's put all this down. Let's get all this out there. And I would like draw out maps, trace them, change things. At one point I was like cutting out pieces with scissors and like moving them, shifting them tectonically to decide how I wanted to go. But so at one point I just sat down and just did map crafting. And then, so now the map exists, and everywhere, all the little places exist as they are. But now those places, just as before, they inform what's going to happen. They inform what animosities different cultures that are nearby to one another might have. They inform difficulties in traveling. They inform where the characters want to go versus where they have to go. And so forth. So it's a lot of back and forth. It's my process is pretty bonkers as far as like, it's basically my head is the cork board of the strike force that's trying to figure out who the heads of all the places are and where they're going to go, and have all the pins with the yarn on them. That's basically my head, and all those things are just kind of swishing around and bouncing off each other all the time. But cool. Case in point, in the book, the travel by bubble, I don't want to give away what happened, but the travel by bubble chapter, that right there is a classic moment of a situation that became a very amazing and emotional chapter, also exciting and wondrous, that came directly out of just what the geography was. Like, characters have to get from point A to point B. And because I had designed this place to have this one point of entry that they couldn't go through, they had to come up with an alternative. And that's the only reason that chapter exists, is because 15 years ago, I decided there was just going to be one narrow pass between this place and that place.
Oh, okay.
And so like, so in a lot of instances, you won't notice it specifically, because it's just little things, like little bits of world building affect each other and whatnot. But in that case, that was a huge thing that happened that dramatically affected that character's life, the point of view character for that section. And affected their ability to carry out their mission, was informed directly from the geography that just happened to be there. So in some cases, it can have a big impact on the story.
That's really interesting. That's super cool. So you kind of touched on it a little bit ago, but how, for We Break Immortals, how long would you say it took you to write it?
Well, it depends on what point along the way. Because it originally started as just a short story I wrote basically in like, high school or something, like a long time ago. And I would put it away for years, and then come back, add things to it, then put it away, and so on and so forth. The current version of the story is basically a complete rewrite of the last version that it was, with new characters, totally new situations, new character arcs, new emotions, all new dialogue, all new events, with just a very loose superstructure of some key events or places that occur left from the original. That process took about exactly a year to do. Because it involved literally dynamiting the original story, like literally blasting apart sections and taking, conversations from multiple areas and putting them together, taking events from different locations and having them all occur at the same location, adding characters, subtracting characters. There are like 4 characters that were in the last version of Wibby that just aren't in this version. Like characters who were major, not point of view characters, but like major side characters. Get characters that were so major that you would remember their names, because they're that featured that much in the story, that just don't even exist in the story anymore. So it was that level of revision, to the point where it's a whole new story, whole new focus, whole new tone, a whole new themes and everything. So that process took a year in total,
Okay.
just about. When I got it in my head to do this, that from that moment when I decided to come back and try to give it a shot and make it a real book, that was almost to the day, a whole year.
Dang.
Yeah, it was almost to the day. So, but if you're going to all the way back to the very
Yeah.
first idea that I had in my head of the characters and some of
Yeah.
the earliest, most recognizable names, we'd be going back 15 plus years probably.
Wow. That is wild. I'm so glad that I don't know what the original version of We Break Immortals was like, but I'm so glad that you did kind of blow it up,
Hey, at the
because
time, I'll
I
tell you what, at the
love
time, I
this.
thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
But now looking back on it, man, it sucked hard compared to what it is now. Like, for uh, the the current version is just there's so much beauty in it and so
Yeah.
much awesomeness in it that was not in the earlier version, that I can't even comprehend how the earlier version lived without the moments that are in this one. So
Yeah. Without Aaron and without Ariana and all these
yeah,
people that we
like
love.
Aaron was in the last version. His name was spelled differently.
Oh,
Corin was in the last version, but he did a lot less. Like,
okay.
Corin originally was just a side character that occasionally had little mini POVs. Like, he didn't even factor in the finale. He didn't
Oh, okay.
have most of his own chapters didn't exist. He was a much more minimalized character than before. There was a lot more quest focus in the other one, or the earlier version, because when I was writing it, I was obsessed with Dan Brown books and Raiders of the Lost Ark and archaeological concept books, both fictional and
Yeah.
non-fictional. So I was very much into that, and there was a lot more heavy emphasis on that early on. Whereas in the current version, it's more relegated to something that is to help the other story, like that's there to help move them along on their path
Right.
to achieving a goal, other than just, obviously there's one character that just wants
Yeah.
the artifact, obviously.
Yeah.
But as far as most of the characters are concerned, they're trying to use this as a means of getting what they really want, which is to stop the superhuman serial killer.
Right. Okay. Well, speaking of parts of We Break Immortals that we love, and it kind of goes along with that. I really loved how you gave us a lot of downtime in between these big, like, major events. We get a lot of time in Westgate and Midian, and I think, is Ariana's homeland called Tyrell?
That's the capital city. The country that she's from is called Lamont.
Okay. But we get a lot of downtime there too, and just kind of these scenes where the plot is always moving forward, but we get these scenes where the characters kind of get to hang out and, like, walk around town and look at things and just kind of talk to each other and have, like, these very somewhat normal conversations, just with each other about the world and about their life. And those were some of my absolute favorite scenes, and they painted such a vivid image. I especially loved our time in Westgate. But I was curious, was giving the characters time to kind of chill out and just interact with each other an important part of your writing process?
Definitely, yeah. I believe in the concept of light and dark, loud and quiet. Like, I believe in having juxtaposition
Yeah.
between two alternate things, which I kind of got by I was a big Led Zeppelin fan and playing guitar and learning instruments. A lot of their songs tend to have like quiet parts and then loud parts and then quiet parts, and instead of like something that's just loud all the way through.
Right.
And that kind of idea, both in TV shows, in movies, in books, in music, I like having moments of quiet time in between action, so that it's not just a giant action fist punching you the whole time and just constant adrenaline. Because when I have read books like that in the past, and it feels like some of the big hits have less oomph behind them because it's already nonstop.
Right.
Every successive oomph, hits a little bit less.
Right.
Because it's always happening. And so I did make a conscious effort to do that originally just for that a dichotomy in pacing, so that I would have like events and then them talking about what happened, figuring out plans, what to do next, preparing, trying to get in place for what to do next. Originally, it was just that mindset. But as I moved on and got better at actually writing and crafting characters, I also wanted to utilize that time to develop characters themselves, develop their personalities. Like in these conversations, I don't want them to just be there just to be quiet. I want them to develop themselves, develop their relationships with other characters. After major traumatic things happen, I want them to go through the psychological effects of those traumatic events. I want to look at it, and obviously you can't show every single minute of every single day of a character dealing with trauma, but I like to take little snapshots of where their trauma is at any given moment, and work that into these downtime moments as well, because I feel like that really helps to get you to the heart of a character, is if you have time to be quiet with them after and see how they react to what actions they just did.
Right.
Because if you just see them do the actions, that you can like, okay, well, they did that, I guess maybe I can think of why. But then to actually see what their mindset is, what's going through their head afterward, and how the actions affect them, and how they feel about what they did or didn't do in that action, I think is a real important, real powerful thing as far as character development. So I definitely tend to have those scenes where, and sometimes entire chapters where it's just going with the characters, going from one conversation to another, just talking to different characters to kind of, I believe there's a part in Carteril, the place you mentioned, where Aaron does have a moment like that, where he's walking through some festivities and he just comes across different characters that are in his orbit at the time, that are not his direct friends, so he doesn't know all their motivations, and having him interact with them to kind of see what those interactions are like, to either heighten tension or heighten suspicion, or to subtract tension, to like I do a lot of balancing acts like that. So but then I also will immediately drop a massive action sequence on you without warning.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Probably one of my favorite things to do is have a bunch of characters talking about things to lull you into a false sense of security, and then the last sentence of the chapter be the beginning of the action sequence. So I have a knack for doing that. That's one of my trademarks, I think.
Yeah. I got caught by a few of those, and those are a ton of fun. I actually, I probably don't have time to go and reread the entire book right now, but I would say that Westgate, which I think is chapters like 10 through 14 or somewhere around there.
Around there.
Yeah. I definitely want to go back through and reread all the stuff in Westgate. But Carteril is the next one that I also want to reread. I want to read whatever those chapters were, because those were two of my favorite places. I really, and I'm not even sure exactly why, but I just really enjoyed the time that we spent in Westgate, because it's kind of this I almost kind of thought of it like almost like the starting zone in a video game. Like before everything really gets rolling, you're kind of in this area where everybody's getting ready for the quest. They're getting some information, and they're kind of just figuring each other out and getting ready to go.
Yeah, a lot of meetings and a lot of big events, and yeah, it's definitely a lot going on in Westgate.
Yeah, I absolutely love that section. And so let's talk about some of these characters real quick. So I realize I wrote this down in a weird way. Please don't take this the wrong way.
Okay.
But so I would say that maybe like none of like the POV characters right from the start are exactly likable in the way that like we as the reader like them, but like they're not likable in their world, because Aaron is very kind of like prideful and a little arrogant, and like he believes that he's the best. He's kind of abrasive towards the people around him. Kellywyn,
he definitely has a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah.
And yes, I love writing characters like that, where the more you learn about their situation, the more you're like, okay, I guess I can see why they're like that. I guess I can see that. But at the same time, it's like they're still like that at the beginning. You when you feel like you got to prove to everybody. I'll let you go on, but yeah, I definitely agree with that.
For sure. And like Kellywyn is I think, like I said in my review, she's like very kind of aggressive and abrasive from the beginning, because she has her own kind of motives and mentality about this whole thing.
Right. And same thing with her too. I mean, she's got the some of the men around her in her group, in her orbit, condescend to her as well.
Sure, yeah.
And so it's like there's and as you learn more of her history, you understand why she's so quick to slap back
right
when somebody condescends. But yeah, at the time you don't know. I kind of wanted to do that a little bit, especially with Kellywyn, because I wanted her backstory to be like cyanide. I wanted it to take a long time. Like I introduce her, but then it takes a while before it actually starts to show effects. I wanted it to be like a real slow drip of information, so that you learn more as you see her grow and change and overcome things. Especially, least of all, herself. A big thing with me is characters being their own worst enemies. Or having protagonists be each other's own worst enemies and their own worst enemies. So that's a big thing I wanted to do. And then of course there's just Corin, who's just fun with weapons, and that's his whole spiel. But
and even him, like to the people around him, like he is like super boastful, and he's like kind of arrogant in like his own way, but he's innocently so. But he's also like he doesn't have so what I mean by all of this is that none of these characters really fit like the fantasy hero stereotype. Like none of them are like on this mission out of like goodwill for the kingdom, at least not really. Like I mean sort of, but they all kind of have their own like selfish reasons for doing it.
It's one of my big themes that I write about, which I didn't know I wrote about this a lot until I literally sat down and dissected my own work. But one of the themes that I subconsciously love to write about is obsession. And taking for whatever it may be. Like in Aaron's case, he's obsessed with proving that he's the guy who can do it, proving he's the best, proving that proving to all the naysayers that they were wrong. Like that's his thing, and he's obsessed with it, and it comes to bite him in numerous occasions.
Oh God, yes.
And we can talk more about that in the spoiler section. But Kelluen also is obsessed with vengeance for her very close friend, and also for finding peace, getting the world to shut up. Because she can't stop the world from intruding into her thoughts, the things that she feels she needs to, the change she feels she needs to make. She feels she can't have peace until she's done that.
Right.
And so that derives her obsession. So these are not good or bad things in and of themselves, but they can lead to bad outcomes because of their obsessive qualities.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would say really all of them kind of have their obsessions. I mean, does Corin have an obsession of some kind?
I guess
maybe just wanting to be like renowned or something.
Yeah, just wanting to be known for stuff. Like I liken his mindset in that regard to Star-Lord from the Guardians of the Galaxy movie.
Oh yeah.
Where he, the whole movie, he just, not that their personalities are remotely similar, but the whole movie, the main character is just wanting somebody to know who the hell he is and recognize him. You know, he wants that respect. And then when somebody finally says his name, he's like, like he takes a break in the middle of a life or death battle to go, oh, finally. And Corin's kind of like that. He doesn't just want to do the things. He wants to be seen doing them. Like he wants people to be like, you know, hey, that guy just did that. And that was pretty cool. He wants people to notice. And every time he does something and nobody's there to notice, he's just going to be like, oh.
For sure. Oh, I wanted to mention also the way that you described your environments, the areas that the characters actually are walking around in. I feel like there's kind of this trend nowadays in modern fantasy to, describe as little as possible so that the reader can kind of like make up their own mind as to, what's actually what things actually look like. And for the most part, it works in a couple situations, but for the most part, I really don't like that. And I really like how much detail you put into your world, kind of crafting all these cities. I feel like in every single scene, I could always like picture it really, really well.
I definitely like to do that. There's a fine line,
sure.
though, where you can easily overdo it with description. But yeah, I agree with you. I'm kind of the same way. I need to see some description of the environment, and then leave me alone. Then just have your characters do stuff and run around, and that's fine. But so I do like to do that. I do like to have some description of stuff in a very concrete way. And then I also like to do drip throughout the chapters as well, as characters are moving through the environment, add in other little things that they're encountering, and then he said this as he passed by that thing. And then, that kind of stuff where because one thing that I hate, and there's a couple of books that I've read that do this, they're not very well known or anything, but I read them a while ago, where it's all just paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of description of the environment they're going through. And and I'm sitting there, even in books where I'm fascinated by that, I'm still like finding myself jumping ahead. And like, so I had that in mind when I went to do my own descriptions of things, and tried to do just enough to give you a sense, and then let you go off and then add some drips and drops here and there.
Yeah.
like throw a couple of things in on the side. And I paid very close attention and detail to where I put those in and things like that. There was a lot of thought put to that for that very reason. But it also depends on the what is happening in the environment, what's going through the characters' minds when they're seeing the environment. Because if you're just leisurely walking through an environment, you will notice certain things and not notice others. If you are specifically investigating your environment, you will notice certain things that someone just walking through it would not notice. How interested the character is in the environment kind of informs how much description I put in.
Right. Okay.
Probably the biggest upfront chunk description that I do, because you may notice I usually like to do like a paragraph or two and then have some other stuff and then maybe a paragraph and then have some other stuff and then from there just a sentence here and there. That's kind of the what I'm mostly going for to try to keep that afloat. But in Kertirol, I have a big drop of description of that city.
Oh yeah.
And that's probably the biggest single blob of description without, because you may have noticed I like to couch a lot of my description and discussion in the dialogue. I like to have people mentioning what they're looking at or mentioning what they're seeing and intersperse dialogue as much as possible. But that chunk is different.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was because seeing this city is literally Aaron's childhood dream. To go to this place, aside from his reason for whatever his mission is and all the other things that are swirling around him and his own emotions, at the base level, this is like meeting his hero, is seeing this place, like somebody that I've always dreamed of going to this city. So the reason I expanded and did a lot of description of that is because it's informed by his experiencing it so much more. Like when he arrives in Westgate, I don't even do an intro to Westgate. I just, jump scene to him being in a building there already. Originally, I didn't in one of the earlier versions, but we can talk about how many pages I wasted doing description and unnecessary travel chapters. But in the book in We Break Immortals, you discover Westgate as he goes through it from the inside. But there's no like, this is how we walked into Westgate. But in Kertirol, it's different. And the reason is because it is like a seminal moment for him to be experiencing this new place. So the description depends on a number of factors, but I do also consider the character who's the one doing the experiencing as part of, because I try to change the way things are described based on the personality of the characters. It's most noticeable with Corin usually, because he has a singular way of looking at the world around him. A very comical way, most would agree, of looking at the things that are going on in the world.
Yeah. I have a question about that later, but I'll just say you can always tell when it's a Corin chapter.
Yeah, I tend to get a little Terry Pratchett-y.
Yeah.
in Corin's inner monologues. Because that's kind of my sense of humor. Is that kind of my kind of humor always kind of hinges on absurdism a little bit. And so you may notice that in the Corin chapters that
for sure
his way of looking at the world is just right in the middle of absurdism.
Okay, so I have one more question before we go into our spoiler chat here, but I also want to say real quick, just a side note, the swear word Farid is so amazing.
Yes, I do have in-world swear words, in-world sexual innuendo for body hair upkeep. I have a lot of in-world innuendo terminologies and swears.
I love the word Farid so much. It's just something you can say with so much like force behind it if you really wanted to, like fucking Farid, like just...
and the way it sounds 1000% informed me deciding on that particular set of syllables and sounds. Very much wanted it to be like, because all the best swears, there's a reason people, when they stub their toe, they say Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like every agnostic person that I know still says that.
Yeah.
When something shocking happens, and it's because it has that sound, it has that tone. When you say, oh shit, like it's because it has those syllables just have that right sound that makes you feel like it's properly expressing your shock or the pain you're going through when you stub your toe or whatever it may be.
Right.
So yeah, I did want to have my swears be also very eminently usable and believable.
How do you pronounce the other one?
Oh, shout.
Shout.
Like, so it's kind of like oh shit, it's kind of like that, but it's like a little sound. So shout.
Oh, okay.
So like think like a person with a brogue accent saying shit. Oh shit. Like, that kind of thing. Think of a Scotsman saying shit.
Oh shit.
And it kind of sounds like that.
Okay.
But that one has a much more understandable and knowable definition, whereas part of the
so what does Farad mean?
of Farad is that it doesn't have a specifically definable definition, and that's what makes it so juicy. Because Corin spends an inordinate amount of time trying to understand what it actually means, even as he's calling people it.
Something about like primates and shit, and there I feel like there is also maybe a little bit of like sexual innuendo somewhere in the middle there.
It's interesting. It's something that will probably be continually guessed about by Corin for as long as he's alive in the series. So yeah, so we'll be seeing a lot more of that. But basically the swear words aren't like a part of my obsessive world building. Is that the swear words aren't the same in every land in the world. The reason that people in Amagon have the same, because those are Iradian swear words from Eridan, the old Iradian Empire, and people in Lamon, we haven't really met anybody in Oberon because we only stopped in Westgate, and then we skipped the rest of Oberon because they were trying to avoid cities. But anyway, they don't have those swear words there because unlike Amagon and Lenagon, any of the other countries were not former colonies and provinces of Eridan. So Amagon and Lenagon have a certain amount of Eridan culture and history in them because they used to be colonized. So that's why there are people not constantly, but like periodically throughout the book are like throwing out Iradian words here and there, but only in Amagon, because everywhere else they were not. They never experienced those words or had those parts of the culture there. So
interesting.
Other places, because people will still say, "Ah, oh, fuck, shit, whatever."
Right.
The
normal
translating their stuff into what we understand. But
right,
I wanted a little bit of zhuzh for some of the Iradian curse words.
Will we see some of the other lands curse words in the next few books?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yep. I've already got a couple because we're going to be seeing some new places in the sea. We're going to be seeing some familiar places and also some totally new places. And we can discuss that when we get to the spoiler section as well. Sure. I'll give you a sneak peek of some of the stuff we're going to be looking at.
Cool. We'll go through that at the end before we sign off.
Sure.
Sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent. My last question for the spoiler-free thing is a lot of the magic terminology is reminiscent of almost like game developer lingo, or like I said in my review, like maybe 3D modeling. Is that kind of where you got this terminology, or how'd you decide on it?
The terminology and even the functionality of it, I borrow from multiple different aspects of science.
Sure.
Like the streams, the building blocks of magic. they bind them together. And basically, to me, that's binding molecules or binding atoms into a
Okay.
molecule.
Yeah.
So it's described in very much that kind of, and thought about in that very much that kind of similar action. Um, I consider like how the slipstream works and how magic works in the world. I consider very much like computer hacking,
Right.
like going into the world environment and hacking into it and switching some of the numbers around, like maybe
Yeah.
switching how much, like a person walking along the ground, let's increase the amount of friction that would occur between their foot and the ground by like 5,000% and see what
Yeah.
happens. Like that's very much, that's overly simplistic thing, but that's something that they could do
Right.
in the world. Or let's see what happens if I detach that rock from gravity and then kick it and then
Yeah.
see what, that kind of thing. So that aspect of it kind of is reminiscent of that. But the actual populating your magical effect into the world after you've bound it and brought it from, there into the real world. I used, computer generated image lingo because
Yeah.
that's what they talk about. Like I'm rendering this dinosaur for Jurassic Park 9 or
Right.
whatever. And I took that terminology from them, and also the use of it as both a verb and a noun, from that kind of lingo, because I spent a lot of time watching cool effects. I've been obsessed with special effects
Yeah.
from well before computers were around, but especially with computers around and seeing all the cool things that they can do. And so the terminologies and kind of the way things work all come together from all aspects of stuff. But yeah, I believe they use it in the same terminology in computer graphics for games, because they use the same process
Right.
because that basically is just ongoing live computer animation
Right.
every game you're playing. So yeah, it's the same terminology.
That's cool. Yeah, I really loved all the terminology, and at first I was like, "Oh, wow, I've never heard like a spell or like any sort of magic like expressed that way." And the deeper I got into the book, I was like, "Oh, this really makes sense. Like, yeah, why wouldn't you render a fireball? Like, why wouldn't you render a magic bullet?" And like the composite, like that's just like the perfect word for what that is that they take from the stuff that's left behind to study. I'm like, yeah, it's great too, because then you have, it's all terminology from something that already exists that you can just pull from as an author.
Yeah, I borrow a lot of science words, and even halfway kind of their meanings as well, but just
Yeah.
I apply them in a different way than what
Right.
their actual meanings are intending to apply. Like I do that for a lot of the little throwaway things like primary values, 0 point energy, things like that.
Oh yeah.
I take them and just repurpose those terms to my own in-world designs. So definitely, I have to balance how much shit I make up. So I occasionally
Yeah.
take real terms and just mess with real terms, just for
So
balance.
so that you don't you don't get like all the made up words confused and mixed up. I feel like I would do that. I feel like I would make up a bunch of like terms and words for the magic system and then forget what all of them are and just get them all mixed up. I will say though, something I forgot to put in my review, and some of it might be a little bit spoilery, but if you, talking to the listeners, if you are currently reading We Break Immortals, in the back of the book there is a glossary with all of the terms.
Yes, there are. I do have a key term appendix back there for some of the magic terminology.
Yeah, and I got to the end because I was on the ebook. And so I got to the end of it and I was like, oh, there's a glossary back here. I could have just opened up my paperback and I didn't even think to look back there.
Well, now you know.
Yeah. So listeners, if you are working your way through the book and are trying to remember what some of these terms mean, then definitely go check that out. Cause I looked through that and I was like, oh, okay. Cause I had there was some terminology that I'd heard a couple times that I was just like, I don't really know what that means, but I just kept going. And so then when I got to the glossary, I was like, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense in that context. Okay, guys, we will be going into spoilers now. So if you have not read We Break Immortals, then you may want to take off. But before you go, be sure to check out We Break Immortals and follow Thomas on Twitter and wherever else he is on the internet. One more time, Thomas, where can people follow you in case they're leaving right now?
Sure. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Ornithopteryx. And on my website, thomashowardriley.com. I'm also on Instagram periodically as Thomas Howard Riley also, but less often.
Cool. And we'll have all those linked down below as well. Okay, if you have not read We Break Immortals, now is your time to kindly get the hell out of here. Spoilers in 3, 2, 1. You've been warned. So first of all, you killed Ariana.
You bastard!
Wow, you really went hard into the spoilers right out of the gate there, my friend.
I gave them the warning if they're not out of here yet.
I do kill characters, yes.
Oh my god.
No one is safe
Yeah.
necessarily. Not even point of view characters necessarily, but yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely the hardest death of the book.
I'm devastated. I'm quite devastated.
Are you?
Yes, I am. I feel terrible because the reason, if I don't feel terrible, then I didn't do a good job.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so if I have a character that perishes, even like a character that recurs in more than one chapter, because I name characters that are only alive for one chapter fairly frequently, just for that. But like characters that are moving along throughout the whole story, if I don't feel if I don't feel regret when they die, then I didn't do anything right.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that I tend to once I know who's going to live and die, I tend to go back and pay special attention to making sure those characters are especially well loved,
right?
by myself and probably by others. But I really try to flesh them out and make them real and make them beautiful, make their story and who they are, their energy, as beautiful as possible, or as so that when they go, it has that impact. The problem with that is that once I make them beautiful, then I start to regret that I ordained that they had to go in the first place. I begin to regret that the story demanded it.
Was there ever a timeline in which she would have made it to like book 3 or 4 or whatever? Was there ever a draft where she lived?
No.
Okay.
And part of doing this is also a challenge to oneself to write characters that are just as good.
Yeah.
To be their characters that come in their plays, both point of view characters and side characters, because man, I miss them. I miss them quite a lot. But yeah, she was one of my favorite characters because she was just a terrifically spunky, cutesy girl who was just a completely impeccably badass swordsman.
Yeah.
But who didn't care. That was just something that she was good at.
Yeah.
Because of her upbringing. And it was real cool because on more than one occasion, Aaron draws his, for show sword that he has, and like he's gonna do something, and only to have her casually like push him aside.
Yeah,
and
I
make him
love
step back
that.
and be like,
I love that.
be like, let's not get ahead of ourselves here.
Yeah.
And she takes care of business.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when they first interact outside of character, I think one of the first things she does is criticize his form holding his sword.
Yeah.
Like turn his arguments around on him in that circumstance. That's one of my favorite lines in the book, probably.
And that's one thing that I really loved about Aaron, because like this book does so much to subvert your typical tropes. Normally we would have this guy who is really bad with a sword, and it's kind of funny how bad he is, and then by the end, like after this quest and after all this training, he gets really good with it and he becomes like this hero. Aaron, by the end of the book, he is still terrible with a sword. Like he is not like good with a sword by the end of this book. And so
yes. I can tell you, I mean, it's not really going to be a spoiler, but I can tell you he doesn't get any better for as long as he's around in the series either with a sword.
Oh, interesting.
I do have another character who I do intend to fulfill to a certain extent that type of thing.
Okay.
Because I have a number of new point of view characters that are coming into play as the series goes forward, and I also like to take minor characters from this book and blow them up into much bigger, more influential characters going forward as well. So I will be having some learning, training, becoming something bigger and better.
Right.
I will be doing that, but not with Aaron. I say, but also I can very tongue-in-cheekily say he's not going to do anything great with a sword, wink wink, because there are other factors other than just sword play, because there are some things, there's not just steel swords, there's also some other magical things that are going on.
Well, that's the thing too, is
this, he does do that one great thing by accident with a sword.
Remind me
point in the book.
You're gonna have to remind me of a lot of stuff.
When he's with the knights, trying to get out of being in a charge.
Yes, I loved this.
Where he
takes off his head.
Basically, he's just like
flailing.
Comedically, like eyes closed, praying, just swinging it back and forth, and accidentally, that's about as good as Aaron's ever going to get as far as sword play. But he has other things to explore, since we're in the spoiler section, not just his own knowledge of magic and undoing magic, but also his now eyes opened to the system and the place and the processes and effects that are behind where magic comes from.
Right.
Because I really have a 3-tiered magic system. I don't like I went pretty crazy with my magic, because like I don't just have a magic system. I have the magic system, and then I have the process for undoing and stopping magic and hunting magic and tracking magic layered on top of that. And then on top of that, I have where magic comes from. And we'll get into it toward the end of the book. They briefly tiptoe into what if I can just completely hack the hack of magic and completely change, like, you know what I mean? Like, so people are trying to do things with magic. What if I can go, to the source of magic and mess around with things there before things even have a chance to take effect? So it's kind of like a layer cake of magic systems all built one on top of the other.
Yeah, I did have in my notes somewhere that the whole, like, everything that a Glass Eye does, like his whole training is almost kind of it's like a magic system in and of itself, like learning to like read the composites and like stopping their access to the slipstream, and all those things. That's very cool. But yeah, a point that I wanted to make though was that the book does so much to show you that a hero doesn't need to be like your standard like fantasy hero, like because like you know like we've been saying, like Aaron isn't good with a sword. He's probably never going to be good with a sword, but he
literally uses his mind and his knowledge to deal with those things. And of course it's like, obviously it's like a team up at the end, because he couldn't do what needs to be done. Part of what is perfect about the situation is that he couldn't have done it alone, and the other characters that he's with couldn't have done it alone. And also that nobody else could have done it but him.
Right.
Because one of the things you'll notice is that it's not too much of a spoiler, because right in the prologue, a character tries to do some things and just doesn't know what he's doing. Like he's reading and looking into and trying to use magic to do the things that he's reading about, but he doesn't understand it. He's doing it wrong.
Pallid or whatever.
Correct. Yeah. Pallid for short, they call him. And he thinks he's doing it right. He thinks he's doing everything right, and he's just not. And it becomes painfully, very tragically, horrifyingly aware of the fact that he messed up.
Yeah.
And doing it. And but if you look at the end, how it all comes out is that they would never be able to weaken the sorcerer enough without Arn's understanding of how magic works, combined with his ability that is sprung on him, that he develops. Basically, he's developing it throughout the story, but I hide it.
Right.
If you ever do a reread, there are multiple occasions where his eyes will spaz out and he'll just see white light and other things throughout the book. I do a lot of hidden.
So this is something that he's born with. Then it's not something that happened at the very end due to
he doesn't know that yet.
Oh, right. Okay.
He doesn't know that yet.
Yeah.
We as the reader have a potential idea that might be the case. But at least for the sight part of it, the he uses the dagger ultimately to go into the place, but his ability to suddenly at the end see things, that's something that is a different thing that is activated in him. But it's kind of ongoingly trying to start, like an engine trying to turn over but not turning over. So periodically throughout the book, there are little moments like that. I do a lot of hiding things in plain sight, type stuff.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, do we find out why it started at the time that it did in the second book? Like, do we find out like why
I go into things going further forward. In this book, it doesn't really jump into how. It's hard to tell where I'm going to go.
Right.
And I am aware of that, because I wanted it to wrap up to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I wanted it, and I tell people I wanted it to be like A New Hope in the Star Wars, the original first Star Wars movie. I wanted it to be a movie or be a book where the main impetus of that story wraps up, but there's all this other stuff still out there.
Right.
That is a problem. Yeah, they got rid of a super weapon, but what about the giant endless galaxy and brutal regimes that brought that super weapon into existence?
Right.
So it's kind of like that, where there's a lot of stuff left open-ended, but the main story completes itself. Like the main mission comes to fruition in the first book. And when you do that, it is difficult for a reader to tell where you're going to go next. and I'm kind of okay with that. I mean, from what I've heard, Red Rising is kind of the same way,
Mm-hmm.
where the first book seems to take a certain tack, which I'm aware of because I have read it once.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, the rest of the books do
They
go
yeah.
go in a more expansive, different kind of direction within that world, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what I'm going to be doing as well.
Cool.
Uh, I mean, kind of. I mean, I am. I mean, the first draft of book 2 is done. I'm currently doing the revision draft of book 2. So it's going to be going into a lot more in detail into those things. But
how many books are you expecting for the series, by the way?
probably around 10.
Oh shit.
It keeps fluctuating 10, 11, 12, 11. It just depends on a couple of factors, but I have certain events plotted out that can take it as far as 10 for sure.
Okay.
For all the things I'm going to be introducing, but yeah,
That's
so
cool.
it's if you do a reread, it's actually not a surprise that Aaron suddenly develops this ability to see the stuff without looking through his device.
Okay.
And it briefly gets mentioned, but he starts to have those things happen to him earlier in the books during other traumatic experiences.
Oh,
As early as
interesting.
the first chapter. I mean, you can go back to the first chapter if you want. After he captures, during his opening capture, I wanted his first chapter to be, I want to show, because in the prologue, I show how devastating someone with magic, doing very simple things with magic, how devastating and terrifying that can be. I follow that up immediately with Aaron's first chapter, showing how that terrifying, horrifying, powerful magic can be undone. I wanted to
Oh,
have
okay.
those two things juxtaposed,
Right.
side by side. But at the end, obviously, during that process, something goes wrong for Aaron.
Yeah.
He has a little hiccup, a little snafu during that, that causes some pretty traumatic shit to happen. And at the end of that chapter, he has something starts to happen with his eyes.
Okay. But
And so
he
I put
catches he catches his guy in that first chapter though,
correct.
right? Doesn't he? Okay.
Yep, he does. Yeah. So I wanted to show a full, like, what the fruition of a full completed mission would look like.
Right. Okay.
So that then for the rest of the book, you can see how he's trying to do that. And also you can see moments where he deviates from what that's supposed to be, that hopefully sets off alarm bells for you. That like, he spends a lot of the book talking about the right way to do things and then suddenly goes off and does them the wrong way out of his own.
God, I want to reread so much now because I don't quite remember.
I do throw in a lot. Like, I mean, I'll give you a couple of examples of In Plain Sight. Go to chapter 1 and read the first line of chapter 1. And I'll tell you what I did to my point of view characters. that line is basically, I'm secretly telling on myself on what I'm going to do with my POVs. If you want to look for it, that's fine. But also I'll give you another example. In all of Aaron's chapters, at one point, somebody tells him to go into the light at least once in every chapter.
Oh, really?
Correct. Somebody says, and they're not referring to this light, obviously.
Yeah.
But in every chapter that is in Aaron's point of view, somebody tells him to go in the light, stay in the light, be in the light, walk in the light, tread lightly. So at some point in every one of his chapters, somebody tells him within the dialogue to go into the light. So I do little dumb stuff like that. I do all the time. So like secret foreshadowing.
So what's the line in the first chapter? I don't have my book anywhere.
Oh, the very first, the opening line of chapter 1 is, one of them is going to die.
Oh shit. Oh, that's great.
So I do things like that, since we've already given away that some pretty heavy stuff. Yeah. I do, but I'll give you one more to show how annoyingly clever I'm obsessed with trying to be. At one point, Kellowan is talking with Chelly, and they're talking about what they're going to do with the sorcerer once they catch them. What they're, the normal thing to do is to burn them. That's the customary thing. And Kellowan at one point says, "I don't care what we do. I'd settle for a knife in the ribs." And then if you fast forward to the final moment that actually does in the sorcerer, if you like,
oh yeah,
Aaron finally does that, that's what happens.
Oh shit, that's awesome.
I do a lot of stuff like
I
that.
do remember
where
that
it's
line.
where it's like 99.9% of people aren't going to notice it unless they do a second read.
Yeah.
I do a lot of stuff like that. I'm very, very cheeky about doing stuff like that. I do that on a bunch of other things. I mean, there's little, like, if you really read between the lines, I give away some things that happen later in the series. Some of the questions, some of the unanswered questions about things that happen in this book, I hid evidence to point you toward the answer for some of them, because there are some mysterious things that happen, like Aaron suddenly having this ability to see the magic after the traumatic event at the end of the book. That's something that is not answered, but there are some things that do get answered throughout the book, like mystery wise, like why the sorcerer Kinragan's power of persuasion, like his luminous immortal energy that just makes people want to do things join with him, that his power of convincing people of things and making them feel special, which Kellowan experiences firsthand at one point where they're trying to do the trap, how powerful that pull is. But it doesn't work on Aaron, right? Because all through the book they keep saying, like, one conversation, like one conversation was all it took to turn the boss man, the Lord Protector of Amagon, against his own country, against his own, to turn him into a wannabe tyrant.
So
all it took was one conversation, and they go through the whole book long. Every time they talk about him, every time Raviel talks about him, every time Ornis talks about him, they're like, this guy's can turn you from an assassin sent to kill him into one of his minions in a single conversation. But so Aaron has like 3 conversations with him.
Yeah. Does it ever,
or if you include the one at the end?
Yeah. Does it ever explain how that power works? Did it explain it in this book?
I put in, well, it's his luminous energy is just making it. I mean, number one, he's a very talkative guy.
Yeah.
And he's very good at talking to people. He's basically a cult leader.
Right.
And a serial killer mixed in one. He's very charismatic.
Yeah.
He's definitely. He's like David Koresh if David Koresh was Ted Bundy and also Magneto.
Yeah.
Like he's so he's got this thing, but why doesn't it work on Aaron? And I did put some hints throughout the book on why Aaron specifically, out of all the other people in there, why it might not have worked on him. And it's not some big, profound, magical thing either, which is what is so funny to me. But if you ever do a reread, you can see if you can look that up. Eventually, I'll spell it out in the series, but for now, it's just hidden.
Cool. All right, I want to move down our notes a little bit. I have actually, real quick, I do want to talk about the prophecy a little bit, because we have this prophecy. And what I liked about it is it is not a prophecy like we get in Wheel of Time or any of these other like big fantasy series, where you can kind of see like, oh, there's this chosen one and he will come to save all the people. And it's kind of very straightforward. Some series do kind of a twisty turny prophecy. But this one, we have one character who believes in it and everyone else thinks that it's shit. And even Aaron is like, sometimes I believe in it, sometimes I don't. And I'm kind of wishy-washy on it. But it somehow,
at the end of the book too, even the sorcerer thinks that the prophecy is talking about him.
Oh, he thinks he's the man of sorrow?
As this because he's talking about the three terrors that are mentioned in that myth that everybody's talking about. Even at the end, he thinks that Aaron, Corin, and Kelluan are the three terrors coming to try to destroy him.
Yeah, see,
so it all depends on your point of view as to whether and I did hide some things too in some of the discussions of history and linguistics and things that they have conversations about in the book. I did hide some hints about what that prophecy might mean in this case. Okay. Also, I did also leave it open-ended that the prophecy may refer to more than one thing. It may refer to more than one event. It may not mean exactly what you mean. It may have 5 different meanings.
Right.
People may be just ascribing meanings to it, or maybe it really is coming true in multiple different ways. I leave it kind of open-ended in that regard for sure.
Yeah. But the thing, I think one of the things that I like about it is that it's not like in most fantasy books where there is a prophecy, it is kind of like shoved in your face. And I feel like it's not with this book. I feel like it's kind of it's there in the background. Mm-hmm. There's a couple characters that believe in it. But really it's not like driving the actions of Aaron. Right.
As I describe it, there's a prophecy, but it may or may not be true. It may or may not refer to who you think it is, and it may or may not ever come to pass.
Right. Yeah. And so I just loved how it was there for the people that wanted it, but also you can read the book without getting too deep into.
There's also like characters will also say things like maybe it's something that you won't understand what it means for 7 years. There's a line that says that in the book regarding prophecy. So some characters may be telling on themselves about things.
Oh, okay. So I have I have an early note of mine from when I was probably about I was probably somewhere around halfway or a little less than halfway through the book. And I wrote, Kellywan makes me so mad so often. Like, bitch, settle down and chill. You're putting everyone else at risk and they're tired of you. I'm like, Kellywan just doesn't understand that her goals and the Axis Arden's goals just don't quite align. She wants to kill Kinragan out of revenge for her friend Seb, but that's a secondary goal for the Axis. They want the boy who Kinragan had for a while.
Yeah, the Axis is moving multiple. The Axis is playing chess with many pieces.
Yeah,
and Kelluan's entire team is just one piece, and so she doesn't see the big picture, and obviously that infuriates her.
Yeah,
because much like myself, if I think something needs to get done, I'm ready to go do it. Let's do it. Let's get this done. What are we sitting around here talking for? Let's go do it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of waiting. Let's take action. Like she definitely has that mindset.
Yeah.
In the back of her head. And you definitely you come to learn why she's so angry, especially about Seb. Because he in particular was like there for her at probably the most vulnerable moment in her life before the story starts. But the main thing that I will say about her is she kind of delivers. At no point does do her actions actually bring the jet. Yeah, she definitely does some things that could very easily bring tremendous jeopardy to the group and to the mission, but she does it every time, and she gets things done throughout the story. And I mean, she volunteers to be bait for the superhuman serial killer. I mean, that takes guts to do that, to put yourself willingly in a room with that horrifying individual or whatnot. But I wanted her to start off with you not being able to totally understand her.
Yeah.
Because I wanted her to unfurl. I wanted it to be like the petals of a rose opening. and showing as the story goes along, and as she reacts to things, and as you learn more about her backstory, and as she herself changes, and her energy changes throughout the story to like unfurl as the story goes along, so that by the end, so that when she is in a place where she can be at peace and chill, it's profound.
Right.
And you're like, that's cool. Like when I wanted it to be, so when she's able to experience a moment of creating new friendship to be profound.
Man. Yeah.
I didn't want, to be like, can we be friends? Okay, let's be friends. Cool.
Right.
Like it needed to feel like the act of doing that was a substantial change for her.
Right. Oh yeah.
And for that to happen, she had to start off in a place of just raw emotion, anger, sorrow, all her baggage like swirling around. In the same way, Aaron starts off as kind of a dick.
Yeah.
And progresses through the story. And I kind of wanted their two storylines in particular to be like points coming together.
Yeah.
Because she's the rogue who's trying to be part of a group and trying to because her backstory is, street urchin, orphan, thief,
right.
sleeping in the gutter, before these, years in the past, before she met the people that she's with now. And so she's used to being rogue on her own. I make the decisions of what I want to do, and this is what I want to do. I want to go do it. So she is really struggling, bouncing off the walls, being in a group where the group is trying to determine what the overall action is. And Aaron, on the other hand, starts off as the seminal cog in a machine.
Right.
Like he sees himself as the best of what he is, but let's be honest, he's the best cog in that machine.
Right.
And his journey is becoming a rogue. So their stories kind of their arcs kind of converge, and they eventually meet each other. And at the same time, they both hate what each other is and what each other represents. And so that huge conflict and how that comes together and resolves is a big part of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's a bigger part of the story than stopping the sorcerer. Is them overcoming, both of them getting over themselves.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And
getting over their paths, and getting over their entire paradigm, the entire lens through which they see the world. No pun intended. To come to a place where they can meet in a consensus way. And it is not to say that it is not a bumpy road.
Right. Yeah.
Because the first time they actually encounter one another up close,
that was incredible. I loved that scene so much, because all of the sudden it was just happening. Like it went from, I think Aaron and everybody was kind of sitting around by a fire, and then
he's basically spends most of the chapter bonding with Ariana and developing their relationship. And throwing in some tidbits of foreshadowing of the science and the magic and the prophecy and stuff too. But like basically it's just them bonding. Yeah. And caring for each other.
And then Kellywin is floating in the sky all of a sudden, bringing up these cylinders, trapping everybody and starting to crush Aaron. And oh my God, that scene was so fantastic. And then the subsequent scenes after that, I mean, Aaron has her on the back of a horse, sedated, just laid across the horse just for miles and miles and miles. Yep. And he comes to realize that she's misunderstanding who he is sooner than do I have that right? He's they're misunderstanding
when they first
each other,
start talking to each other, they are definitely both talking past each other.
Yes, exactly.
They very much both have a preconceived notion about who each other is.
Right.
And where they're coming from and what their purposes are. And he comes to realize it well before she does. I mean, chronologically, it's probably about a couple of weeks before she does, because from their first two back-to-back day-night conversations, like a couple weeks elapse before they have, like after the battle in with the knights. A couple of weeks go by of them before they get to the Blackwell, where they have that final conversation where she starts to turn.
Right.
And that had to be done very carefully.
Yeah.
Because for it to feel organic. Because literally when they meet each other, they both hate each other on a fundamental level, not personally, like literally hate what each other are and what they stand for.
Right.
And also think that each other is trying to kill each other and each other's friends.
Right.
And so to have that go on a believable path toward maybe thinking, oh, maybe I need to know more about this person. Maybe, and then going from there to, okay, maybe this person is kind of all right.
Yeah.
Like, at least they're not they may be an asshole, but they're not a total dick.
Yeah.
And then to go from there to be like, okay, maybe they're an asshole, but they're kind of cool. They kind of know what they're doing. I can kind of, and then to have that, it's a gradual build to get, much in the same way as like Arn's relationship with Ariana is a gradual build.
Yeah.
From, crush, friendship, romance throughout the story. It's also that way in a platonic form for Arn and Kelowin.
Right.
To the point where the night before they're about to go out on the mission, like their conversation, like after they're both done having sex with their respective partners.
Yeah.
Those
they
are
both
two
meet outside.
those are two exceptionally intimate moments.
Yeah.
Back to back. And that was kind of what I want. And you may notice like what I was talking about their arcs paralleling. You may notice that those two scenes for each of those characters are literally back to back.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's the reason is that's kind of the moment showing that they're starting to come into parallel with each other. Where their mindsets are starting. And then arguably the conversation that they have with each other afterwards is almost as intimate as those scenes with their respective lovers, there's significant others.
Right.
Because that's the moment where they totally see eye to eye.
Right.
And are both, on the same page 100% about what needs to happen next, which has to occur because the way that because defeating the sorcerer at the end is not just a one-step process, obviously, because they have to engage in this battle, which they lose. Then they have to go further. And then it's just a chess game of them trying things and then him getting out of it, them trying something, it not working, them trying something, him getting out of it. And the point where they finally get something that fully, totally works, only works if Arn and Kelowin totally trust each other 100%.
Right.
Because he has to be able to combine his knowledge of what he's looking at.
Oh, that was so cool.
With his vision of what he can see combined, but he has no power. All he has is his knowledge. And the funny thing is, somebody who has the knowledge but can't see wouldn't be able to do it. Right. Somebody who could see but didn't have the knowledge, wouldn't know what they're looking at, wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Only Arn can do it. But he doesn't have the power to do it. So he has to be totally in line with her. Like they're literally, I have their heads touching.
Yeah, I love that.
And he's literally pointing, like somebody helping somebody putt for the first time.
Right.
With a golf glove, or helping somebody, leaning over them to help them shoot their first, use the cue for the first time in a game of pool.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was
so basically them coming together and being able to trust each other in that conversation is what sets up that moment. And that moment would not be able to occur if they weren't able to come together and be friends who could totally trust each other by the end.
That's awesome. I absolutely love that scene where, he gets up right next to her face is right next to his, and he's pointing at all the bubbles to shoot and everything. And that it definitely came across that way, is that she trusts him implicitly now. And
because like to her, she can't see it.
Yeah.
So she doesn't know he's telling her to shoot in the middle of the air at nothing.
Yeah.
So she literally has to trust him that
right.
That he's telling the truth and that he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so forth. So yeah, that was a very, very powerful moment. They even kill each other, the person who killed their respective lovers as well, their respective romantic partners.
Oh yeah.
You may notice that, like, that's something that you may not, because they're two totally different people, like two totally different kinds of people.
Right.
One is just like a cultist, which I will point out is one of the few characters that I do not name in the entire book.
The guy with the bells.
The guy with the bells on his boots. I even name some of the other major minions of the cult of the sorcerer, but I don't name that guy. I wanted the hurt to hurt Aaron going well into the future. It's important for it, and not knowing who the person was, even who did it, not knowing their backstory. At least Kellen knows who Ken Reagan is, and there's all sorts of proof of his history. She knows exactly who he is.
Well,
but they end up, as a side note, they end up, because Aaron is the one who finally finishes off, although Kellowan does the heavy lifting,
right,
to get him into that vulnerable state. Aaron's the one who pulls the final trigger. And then vice versa, Kellowan literally, because, like, you may also have noticed that her magic ability is literally making gun fingers at people. So which I got a big kick out of. But like she's the one who takes out the guy with the bells on his boots.
Well,
like at point blank range,
right? Yeah,
which is nice.
The guy not having a name actually really worked in favor of it. It honestly made him like kind of terrifying, because he's just this guy with these bells on his boots, and he's really like sadistic, and you have no idea really like just how dangerous he is, but you know that he is, and he's killing all these people.
And the bells on his
boots, was terrifying.
Like there's characters who hear the bells. I mean, and I think he might be the minion that's in the most chapters of all the other minions, because even though there's some minions that are in direct long battles multiple times throughout the book, like, because he's in the room with Karin at the beginning, in the Red God, he's everywhere. He's in Caer Tyrrell attacking the Kellowan's crew. Like he's everywhere. He's in Medion, like he's all over the place. So yeah, I wanted him to be like a force that felt different, like a menace that felt different, because it was unknown, because the unknown is scarier than the known. So sure.
Something I want to make sure that we talk about during this episode. I think my counter on Zoom says 2 hours and 24, but I think we were talking for maybe like 20 minutes before we hit record.
And we had a break. So
okay. So I want to make sure before we, get to the end of this eventually.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
That we talk about Malagain, because this was one of my just kind of favorite additions to this book, because it's really rare that you see a character who is addicted to something in these books. The only one that I actually know of is called the Fallen Blade series, and the main character Errol is addicted to this thing that's actually quite a bit like Malagain, and it's called Ethic. And so I really love this, because you don't get to see that kind of thing in fantasy books that much. So I'm interested, where did you get not only the idea for the drug itself, but also to have Aaron be addicted to this thing, and like chronically addicted, like he is taking this all the time.
It even comes in, its leaves are gray. The leaves that they crush up to smoke are great. Like literally, he's literally a morally gray character smoking morally gray drugs, but basically he's self-medicating. Deep down, I have this love of noir conspiracy stories, where you're looking into one thing and you end up uncovering a whole another thing going on, and then trying to see if there's any way to change, like Chinatown style, if you've ever seen that film. so I kind of like having that aspect in there. And one of the big things about noir stuff is that the detective always is self-medicating with something.
Yeah.
Usually it's whiskey,
Yeah.
but
Right.
in this case, it's informed by that. I won't go into too much into personal back histories, but I also had seen this kind of thing appear before in media on a couple of other occasions, which is what didn't drive me to do the idea, because I was already 100% in on doing a self-medication type thing. And I was developing the thing, but the thing that gave me the push to go ahead and pull the trigger and do it was the movie Minority Report.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
in that movie, the main character is addicted to this nasal spray inhalant
Oh, it's
medicine.
been a long time since I've
And
seen
it
it.
doesn't really come up in the movie a whole lot. I just remember this one scene about how he is uh uh basically medicating his sorrow and his trauma with this prescription medication. And I was like, okay, I think I am going to go ahead and go forward with this idea.
Yeah.
Because obviously mine is leaves that you crush up and smoke, or you
Snort.
can you can granulate into powder and then inhale. There's also an in-world stimulant. I have like a whole bank of in-world
Hurricane
medicines. So there's like, I have like 40 of them. Only like 5 show up in the first book. But yeah, hurricane powder is basically cocaine.
and like
it's
PCP or something. It's like
a very
like,
heavy duty. Yeah, it's a very heavy duty stimulant slash painkiller slash, anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously there are reasons why you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
As certain characters find out. But as far as Aaron, I wanted him to have that part to his character, that he is to kind of show how obsessive he is. He is so obsessed with being like, the reason that he has to take it is because of the horrific stuff he sees at crime scenes. That like, he even points out early on when he's talking, like, you know what to expect when you get a call that somebody's been stabbed with a sword. You know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
What's it going to look like when somebody crushes
in
someone
bubble,
into a little ball? What is that? You know what I mean? Like the horrific things that he sees are on another level, but he doesn't quit. Like a normal person would be like, I can't take this anymore. This is awful. I'm going to quit. But he's so obsessive about being the best at doing that, that he can't make himself quit. He wants to keep doing it. So he takes this drug to do it. And it also exposes kind of his obsessive addictive personality, which you will see how that shows up later on in the series as well, going forward. But I wanted him to have that. Because it also made this dynamic where he's, at the same time as he's needing to do it to deal with his emotions, because he doesn't know how to deal with trauma and emotion alone, because he's been doing it for so long. But simultaneously, he's super embarrassed about it.
Yeah.
Hides it from everyone. It doesn't want to be found out, and all of that. So that is something that just feeds into his character and his character arc.
Yeah, I want to say you really nailed all of the kind of just kind of random I guess like quirks and just things that like an addict does. This isn't like breaking news or anything. I've talked about this on the channel, but I used to be a opiate addict for several years before I got clean. And I'm watching Aaron as he's going through this book, and I'm like, that's spot on, that's spot on, that's spot on. There's so many points where he is just like a little overstressed. Like he doesn't really need the Malagain at that particular moment, but he's just like a little too stressed or a little too anxious. And he just kind of reaches for that
like
pouch
it's like reflex.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
yeah.
He's doing it without knowing it.
Yes, and some moments he almost gets, like, obviously at least one moment he gets himself into actual trouble literally because of it. But
Oh yeah,
but there are times where he almost gets in deep trouble because he's doing it without thinking at very bad moments.
Yeah.
Because as things start to build up in him, he starts feeling the pull of it even more. And yeah, so I definitely wanted him to have that extra bit to his personality and to his complex character, because
And
he's a young man
yeah,
who has seen a lot of things, a lot of bad things, and it's made him prematurely cynical,
yeah.
in that regard. So, but yeah, that was a thing. It's actually funny. I've gotten a number of compliments on that aspect.
Oh, cool.
People like, because people always say, like, well, I really love your action sequences, they're amazing, I love your description of world building, but those are things I expect
Right.
from a fantasy author, particularly a male fantasy author. But your depictions of sex scenes and drug use are amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, thank you very much.
Well,
They were like, those were there. People were like, spot on.
yeah.
That was beautiful. Those are beautiful.
Well, they're
depictions.
They're just so true to life. Like I even have a note here. There was a scene that I particularly liked where I can't remember exactly where in the book it is, but Aaron and probably Ariana are having like a really like pleasant afternoon. Like everything is going really well, but out of nowhere, he just gets like irritated and he just can't like control it. And he kind of like snaps and has to go off and do his Malagain. And I'm like, dude, how many times in the past were there times where I was having a perfectly pleasant day, and then just because of like the addiction and many other factors, like, drugs like opiates cause you to get irritated at random times, and you really can't control it. Like you really can't.
Yeah. It's like this mechanism where it replaces over time your body's natural ability to control those things.
Right.
And yeah, so not only does it make you like it from a physiological standpoint, it makes you not able to not like it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's a one punch. Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, the scene where Aaron goes to jail and they take his Malagain, and then they break him out. But on the way out, he's like, "I have to stop and get it," and so they have to go all the way back around to like get into the.
Well, they're going back to
room.
get rid of. To be fair, they're going back to get the other stuff too, like the notebooks and the other tools.
That's right.
However, that being said, when Aaron's digging through stuff, he finds
that's right. That's what happened.
Full of like important artifacts, notebooks that will help their whole mission, and he literally just throws it over his shoulder, doesn't care.
Oh yeah,
he's trying to get, and it's just a brief little line, but yeah, I really wanted to hammer that home.
And then especially like after that, because
it's kind of like in Train Spotting when he loses the suppositories in the what's it, the most disgusting toilet in all of Scotland. It has like a label. It's kind of like that, like where in the worst possible moments you are still thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then so like at that point, Aaron has been without it for several days or whatever, and he's like feeling the withdrawal effects. And so they finally get out of there, and he is just cramming this shit up his nose, or whether he's smoking it or what. Yeah. And he is completely laid out while his whole team just gets attacked. And he's literally just like laying there on the ground, like, I physically can't do anything.
Yeah, that was a very,
oh my God.
That was a very difficult scene to pull off technically, because I had to describe a fight scene from the point of view of a character that's not in the scene, that's not part of the action. Because Aaron is just laying on the ground. And I had so that scene that you're talking about, to make that scene still be emotional from the perspective of a person that's not doing it, that's not partaking in that, was it was difficult to get that line. That was one of the more difficult ones, because it has to be more emotive, because when you're a point of view character experiencing an action scene, your mind doesn't have time to experience emotion.
Right.
So, and I try to write description of things in the mindset of the person that's experiencing it. So when a character is in the middle of a fight scene, they're seeing just chaotic images, especially Arendt, because he has no training in any of this stuff. Right. So like, he's basically like this anytime there's action happening. So like, he gets little bits and pieces of things that are happening, whereas somebody like Corin is like thinking about what pose he's going to use and what stance that he wants to use to like maximize the look of his greatness or whatever his effect that he's trying to do. And or like at the end where briefly Fanon gets some point of views, like he is thinking of his stillness and his blankness of his mind. So I try to do the fight scenes from that point of view. And so when you're not in the action, you're seeing it, experiencing it in a much more emotive way, because your mind isn't distracted by participating in it. Right. So you have more time to fully experience and understand the fear and the sort, because you don't, so that was an interesting one. But yeah,
that was
it's one of the characters. The drug is definitely one of the characters in the story.
Oh, for sure. And how much of it did he bring with him initially? Because I don't think it ever mentions if like he's picking up more Malagane along the way.
He brought his whole stash. He doesn't actually get more.
Oh, okay.
The story, it talks about at the beginning briefly that he brings basically his entire stash, because he knows it's going to be a long journey.
Okay.
So he brings all his leaves, all his powder, and he keeps it with him at all times, even when he's sleeping. Like his sword and all his other stuff, his other gear, he'll stow aside, but he'll keep that on him.
So how big is this pouch?
Well, it's like this, but I mean, like you get a lot of bang for your buck with this particular drug.
Right.
So he's got like a pouch. I mean, we're talking like a tote bag, like a small, like a
fanny pack,
the kind that you would put a 6-pack in, like a pouch or something, or like a fanny pack, like an oversized fanny pack size pouch that he keeps looped on his belt. But by the end of the book, he's thinking about, like, I think the last thought that he has in the book is thinking about where he's going to be able to pick up some more Malagane. So I wanted that to be ever present in the story. And also a couple of people pointed out that they really liked that. That this did not turn into he was inspired by the tragedy or by the triumph or by whatever happened to like overcome the addiction. They were like, I really appreciated that after all the stuff that happened, he's still just doing it. And he still just can't get rid of it. And it will be with him for a long time and affect the story for a long time to come.
I certainly really appreciated that. I really liked that by the end, he didn't have like this redemptive arc where he gives up the Malagane yet or anything. Because
I wanted it to be a big hint that there's still a lot of emotional turmoil in store for him going forward. Right. Like really bad emotional turmoil.
And I also really liked how often you put in there that he was taking it. Like you pretty much write down every moment that he takes it throughout the journey.
I mean, every time that he's on screen, obviously if I skip over like 6 weeks of travel, I'm skipping over. But I did try to put it in as often as he would be realistically doing it in a scene.
Yeah, because even with like the Fallen Blade series, the ethic is in there, and you understand that this character is like taking the ethic and whatnot. But it's not nearly as prominent as how much Malagane was in this book. And I really like that from my point of view, like, cause when I used to do opiates, you do those like 5 or 6 times a day sometimes. So, I really liked how that was kind of represented as, this ever present thing that he is that he is
it's
he's
literally a
always trying to,
shadow clinging to him. Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So I don't know. I have a bunch of notes here, but so I would imagine that you haven't been able to talk too much spoilers up to this point. Is there anything that you particularly want to talk about when it comes to spoilers? Anything you've been really eager to discuss?
No, I mean, I think we landed on a lot of those ideas already throughout the course of what we're talking about. It's just because all that stuff would be impossible to talk about without doing spoilers, because of how things turn out at the end and how you don't know how things are going to go down until a significant part of the book. One of the things I did was I wanted to keep people guessing, because Aaron and Corin and Kelluan are all in the same city at the same time, like 9 times before in 9 different cities before they actually finally all meet together.
Right.
And I kind of intentionally did that to make you think, oh, they're all in the same city. Oh.
Yep.
Before I cut out a couple of chapters, it was even more significant because Corin originally and Aaron also both originally had chapters in Aldria, where they, after they escaped, they both also had chapters in Palantir when they're escaping through the wilderness after the big battle.
Oh yeah.
In the woods, or in the field in the middle of the woods after they have that battle. I ended up having to cut some of those completed chapters for time and space, basically, in the book. But they're also, all 3 of them are present in the wilderness at the same time, and all 3 of them are present in Aldria at the same time. Then they're all in Medion. They're all, so I wanted to keep that going, to be like, man, are they ever going to meet?
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of thing. Also, the whole thing that happens where Aaron's world turns upside down when they get in the fight with Raviel, and then everybody reveals that they have these ulterior motives. One person is fooling another, but then that person's being fooled by someone else, and everything goes upside down. That part was really important to me to convey Aaron's the total destruction of Aaron's support system. And not like, because when he loses Donovar, it's a huge, devastating thing. But he also at the same time loses his entire life, his career, any hope for the future of ever being able to do what he does again. And also, he learns that every memory he has of his mentor, his beloved mentor, and the Lord Protector, who he thought was his good friend, is all permanently tainted all at once. And so it was, and also during that, to also show how powerful the sorcerer was, that he, turned the Lord Protector into this person just by talking to him. But also that scene's important because that one scene is the reason that Aaron doesn't hold up his hand to give unanimous decision to kill Kelluan when they first catch her, when she tries to kill him. Because when he's talking with her, when she's tied to the rock, and he's interrogating her, he mentions that literally everybody else in his party, especially Ariana, voted to kill this chick immediately. And that he was the only one who didn't. And the reason he didn't was because of how bad he felt about being fooled into helping to kill Raviel. Back during that scene when they're in Sinsarak in the chapel, where Terrell tricks him, Terrell's being tricked too, but Aaron grabs his leg and throws off his focus and leads to taking him out. And the reason he keeps her alive long enough to interrogate her is because he doesn't want to make the same mistake.
Oh, I didn't put that together. And that's very cool.
Because he does mention there, I was very subtle about it, so that's understandable. But I mentioned I did this happened once before, and I made a snap decision without knowing everything, and I didn't want to do that again. I wanted to know all the everything I wanted to know first before deciding whether or not to kill him.
Very cool. All right, so a couple more things before we start wrapping up here. I loved Corin and his running causeway joke.
Yes.
If I ever actually find a fucking causeway, I better get to do something magnificent on it.
Yes.
And then at the end, I finally found the fucking causeway.
Yeah. At one point, one of my good friends who was a beta reader was especially like at the part where he's like, "Are causeways even real?
Yeah.
Is any of this real?"
I know. I had to look it up.
Everything's named after a causeway, but there isn't actually any causeways. Fine.
Yeah. Oh my God. I absolutely
Corin is fun because he is as I describe him, he's simultaneously irreverent and hates pious people, hates religion, hates any of the gods, but simultaneously is obsessed with trying to figure out how to properly sacrifice to whatever god he thinks he is in the domain of, as a just in case, as a CYA. And that will continue throughout the series as well, because that's kind of his running thing, is that he's like, nah, I don't care about anything, but just in case, I will care about this for one moment. He's a lot of fun. The best thing about Corin is getting to team him up with a straight man, to bounce his absurd comedic.
Oh, Rightos.
Yeah. And throughout the series, I have plans to continuously pair him up with other people who don't think the same way as he does, to see what kind of comedy ensues.
Yeah.
If my battery dies, just go right into the wrap up, because we're getting close.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Okay.
If just in case I go blank and it just freezes, I'll just hold up my hand, so I'll always be waving goodbye.
You're right. Yeah.
Freezes. So then if it freezes, I'll still be saying goodbye during your outro.
Okay, cool. I'll get this wrapped up here. So this is the one that I wanted to mention, the scene that I wanted to make sure that I told you that I enjoyed a lot, was the maze of arches where they go down
the labyrinth.
Oh, that was so good, because it wasn't just like your typical labyrinth. Like, you can technically see everything, but it all looks the same.
Yes.
And so you have no idea where it is. And it even got to the point for me where when the other guys were coming in and they were trying to come back to the ladder, and they're like, we went left, then we went right, then we went left, right. And I'm trying to like picture it in my head, and it's even like confusing me. I'm like, no, I don't know if they're going the right way.
Yeah, because I wanted Aaron to be like panicking the whole time that if I stop counting, because they're simultaneously running at one, because it starts off as a fully liminal space where it's completely vacant, like an abandoned, place, but then suddenly they're being chased in it. And so he's trying to, like, with all the adrenaline running through, he's still trying to count. And I wanted to get that level of tension. But I also do not ever explain why that maze is there.
Yeah.
Where it came from, at least not in this book.
Yeah.
So it's a complete unknown mystery location. But I wanted to do something non-traditional. I'm really big about trying to find some way to get a wedge in on traditional things and do them a little bit slightly differently. Even though I do keep to tropes sometimes, I like to the tropes that I keep to, I like to put in a twist. I like tropes with a twist, if not outright turning them on their head. I like to at least have some kind of a twist.
I even really liked I think it was right after that they end up in the fishing village, right? With the black water and all that. I really loved that scene too. But okay, so I want to just rapid fire some of these quotes that I really liked. I just want to go through them real quick. Aaron followed Redivere, the others trailing behind with degrees of proximity directly proportional to how much they gave a shit about Aaron's trace. That meant that Corin was by far the furthest behind.
Yep.
And then in Midian, Corin is like, the problem with towers, in Corin's estimation, lay solely in the extra steps required to get from a high room to a tavern. Any tavern, reputable, disreputable, squalid, seedy, notorious, partially collapsed.
Yep.
And then I think this is a conversation between Corin and maybe the boy, Halan, I think. He says, someone was chasing me. The boy says, why? Because I liberated his daughter from her servitude to chastity. And the boy says, what's chastity? And then Corin says, it's horrible, like torture.
That's Corin in a nutshell.
And then not a funny quote, but definitely probably like my favorite quote in the book, I think, next to maybe another one by Kellywin, was it's when Aaron is camping and he's kind of sitting there at night. I can't remember when exactly it is, but he says, when the night was at its darkest, it was as if the whole world had died, its people asleep in dream, its creatures slinking in quiet shadow as they searched for prey, leaving those who were awake frozen outside of time, drifting like ghosts. And then he goes on to say, when midnight comes, we are each alone, every one of us in our own midnight. And that was just so, I absolutely love that. I like,
Yeah,
I want
can you
that
tell
on a shirt.
I'm a night owl?
Yeah, exactly. Me too. Yeah.
Oh, I'm about to lose my battery, man.
Okay.
So if I freeze up, just do the outro. But I really enjoyed talking with you and wanted to let you know before my computer fails
For
that
sure.
this is a really dope convo. And I'm definitely up to talk to you anytime in the future about this or anything.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And
I'm really glad you enjoyed the book.
Yes. Oh my God. I loved it so much. #1 favorite of the year so far. Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer from the editing room. Thomas's battery died right after the outro. And I had forgotten to ask him what he was working on next. So I just wanted to put that in right here real quick. He says that he is working on the sequel and that he has a somewhat unrelated short story in the same world that will be put for beta readers soon. No release dates at this time, but most likely before the year is done for both, which is wild. So enjoy the outro. All right, guys, we are going to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to follow Thomas on all of the social medias. I'll have all of his stuff linked below in the description. And if you made it all the way through this video, why don't you give yourself a pat on the back? And with the other hand, hit those like and subscribe buttons and ring the bell icon to get notified when we put up new content. You can also follow us on Twitter at Files Fantasy if you really want to regret every choice you've ever made. We post about what we've been reading and give tons of great fantasy and sci-fi recommendations. Stay tuned for those fun upcoming videos we mentioned earlier. And until next time, take care of yourselves, you filthy ferrets.
Awesome.